Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About It. This is Susan Johnson, and my co-host Dennis O'Brien is out doing great things in the community. But we have an absolutely fabulous guest for you with lots of fabulous information. We have State Representative Kate Farrar, who represents the 20th House District, which includes the towns of Newington and West Hartford. So I welcome you to the show, Kate.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah. And so, we have a couple of things because Representative Farrar sits on Finance, Revenue, and Bonding, and I sit on Appropriations. So we kind of cover the whole financial picture. So, this is quite a nice thing to be able to have somebody from Finance and Appropriations who are really very, very concerned about some of the cuts that we have learned about that are going on right here in the state of Connecticut because of what the federal government is doing to so many of the agencies. Yesterday, we heard that public health was going to be cut by how much?
$150 million in our state that we were suddenly cut for mental health services, for child immunizations, for our mental health and substance abuse programs that are out there. And I know in my district, West Hartford and Newington, and every health district around the state, they're losing funds to provide immunizations, which keeps us all safe and healthy.
And that's very terrifying to think that we're going to lose the money to keep the students, our little children, immunized. And of course, the other types of opportunities for payment might be for senior citizens through the Medicare program, but that remains to be seen because they haven't quite gotten to trying to eliminate Medicare and Medicaid. But we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Maybe they'll save it. What do you think?
I think we just have to keep paying attention every day, right? Because I think our jobs in the legislature is just to protect Connecticut residents come what may. I think that's what we're so focused on.
I think that's absolutely right. So we want to just say that's what we've lost now. How many millions again?
150 million.
150
million.
Yeah.
And I think, we're bracing for, all sorts of efforts to come. We've definitely heard what could happen to our education dollars, what more could happen to our housing dollars, what more could happen, as you said, to more of our Medicaid and Medicare and even Social Security. And it really requires us to pay close attention, make sure that we're fighting for the residents no matter what comes.
Exactly. We've got to be there. We've got to be together. And I just want to say to all the listeners, it's time for us to work together and listen. And we have a group down there at the footbridge, not at the footbridge, at the frog bridge rather. And they're campaigning, they're protesting. And what I want to do in this show now is try and make sure every week, and let's talk about it. What we will do is try and let the people know who are listening, try and let the protesters down at the Frog Bridge know just how much the state may be losing or is losing. And then we'll be adding it up every week just to see where we are and see what we're going to have to do with our budget. Because this is budget season for the state. It's also budget season for the towns. And so these impacts are going to have an impact straight down to the towns. So this is something we want to really watch and keep focused on. So the other committees that you're on include higher ed and transportation. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in those.
Oh my gosh. In higher education and employment advancement, I think one of the real focus areas relates to all of our efforts to just keep Connecticut more affordable. And on that committee, there's been a lot of efforts to make sure that we're really providing the scholarship support that so many students need to go to Connecticut higher education institutions and make sure they're not taking on as much debt, because we know the high costs right now of going to college keep going up and up, and it's really on us as a state to make sure that there are scholarships available to students who are pursuing their higher education in the state. That's definitely one of the key areas of focus on higher education. And on transportation, a lot of it, I know about you, Susan, but I hear a lot from folks just about what more can we do to get our roads safer. And one of the things we've been pursuing on the transportation committee is improving the use of speed cameras in our work zones, and we're now going to be exploring the use of speed cameras even on our state highway system, so we can really address some of the concerns of speeding that folks have seen really through the pandemic. And I know for myself on transportation, I'm also very focused on how we make sure we're putting the dollars towards how we can better design our roadways so people can walk and bike and use transit and not just depend on their cars. And we can make more livable and vibrant communities too.
Yeah, transit is a huge issue, but just for a second, I want to go back to higher ed.
Yeah.
Here we are with Eastern Connecticut
We are.
State University right here in
Right
Wyndham.
here.
And UConn is straight up the street, about 10 minutes away. And then we have the community college, Connecticut State Community Colleges, Quinebaug Valley, right across the street from the radio station here. So we are really an educational center, and we're all about making sure people here in the district and people who want to come to go to Eastern or go to UConn or have community college certifications or associate's degrees, that they have access to the resources that they need, and that they can begin these programs and not have it cost a whole lot of money.
It's true. And I have to admit myself, as a proud UConn alum myself, I think that for our students, we see how pivotal it is to keeping students in the state when they go to state institutions. That's how we keep the strong workforce and all of that brain power here in the state, if we support students to stay in Connecticut.
Absolutely. I think when you take a look at our colleagues, a lot of us are graduates of UConn or Eastern or Western or Southern or Central. I know I am a graduate from Eastern and community college.
Mm-hmm.
So I got my associate's degree at Manchester Community College. I was going to be a physical therapist, so it's all in biology and science. And then I came to Eastern and they lured me into sociology. So yeah, and then I went to work as a paralegal doing the work at Legal Services as representing people in Medicare cases, and that was like the perfect combination of both like the sociological kind of stuff with the healthcare stuff. So I had a very good time.
But always the helper. Things. You always have the helper aspect to it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the focus. And of course, back in those days, you could read about every anti-poverty program in the country. And so I had a ball. It was called Clearinghouse Review, and I loved reading every single detail from every single state on how they did their programs, which is, when I got to the Capitol, I go, oh yes, now I can go to Eastern Regional Conference of State Legislators, or NCSL, and see what's going on nationally all over again.
Exactly. I appreciate you sharing that, because there was a time I lived in Washington, D.C. for several years, and I worked for a couple national organizations where, very similarly, I got to travel around the country and learn and work with states on how they were really advancing family economic security. And once you get a sense of what more different states could be doing, you always want to bring it back to your own to make a difference. Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's why I love the Women in Government. And hey, I've been invited to go to the Eastern Regional Conference of State Legislators here in Maine next week. So I'm going to be talking about healthcare with them. Rural healthcare, because as you know, you've suffered here with the cutbacks at Wyndham Hospital. Exactly.
And maternity and delivery, and it's how I helped create the Office of Healthcare's health strategy, and we're still doing that. So we got more bills on that, more bills, as they say, and we'll be doing some more on that. But I wanted you to tell a little bit about how you got to decide to be a legislator.
Well, the people decided. That's the thing.
How do you decide to run?
The people really decided. But yes, as
point.
The story goes, as I shared, I attended, the University of Connecticut, and when I was a student there, believe it or not, I had a class assignment in which I had to interview a politician, and I had never met a politician. My parents certainly voted. We talked about politics a lot at home, but I'd never actually met someone who was an elected official. Mm-hmm. And in that class assignment, I reached out to who was the state representative that represented UConn at the time. And I was very lucky that happened to be Denise Merrill, who went on to become our Secretary of the State. But Denise met with me. I interviewed her. And in that interview, she suggested, I come to the Capitol and intern for her. And I thought, okay, why not? I'd never actually stepped foot on our state capitol either. Grew up in Connecticut, but never had the school field trip, and once I took up Denise's offer on that and showed up at the state capitol, I think it really, gave me kind of two things that stuck with me. One was all these issues that I could possibly care about, be it voting rights, be it women's rights, be it environmental rights, all these things are being decided right here in my own backyard, not just in Washington, D.C., or not just at the UN in New York City. And the second thing I think that really struck me from that first time walking in that building and interning for her was honestly how few women there were. How few women there were in these really key decision-making roles in our state. And it actually, from that internship, led to several other internships where I really dug into being an advocate, being a nonprofit advocate for many causes. But I spent really over 20 years focused on nonprofit advocacy for gender equity, really fighting for women and girls and our economic needs and our economic issues. And for me, in kind of coming back to the state 9 years ago, and hence also leading an organization here, the Connecticut Women's Education and Legal Fund, I think I kind of saw with new eyes, not just how much hadn't changed in our state in regards to addressing issues of poverty, addressing issues of inequality. But I also saw for myself that I also kind of had to take my own advice. I'd been encouraging other women to run for so many years that I had to take my own advice. And that's why in 2020, even before the pandemic started, I jumped in to run for state representative, really with the intent of making sure that I could kind of bring my own experience to these really important issues, but also just be a champion for my community. And that's really what's been at the forefront of why I wanted to do this work, really be a champion for my community and also address these really long-standing needs in our state to make sure that everyone can thrive, and not just the few in our state.
That's exactly kind of the thing that we face, isn't it? When we become a state, when we get elected, when the people put their faith in our ability to help them out, and we're faced with, we have these experiences and this policy background, and then we also have the district's needs. I mean, you have 2 districts to think about. I have Wyndham, which it's like 2 or maybe 10 districts. but it is the kind of thing that you look at and you think, how are you going to, which policies are you going to pursue? And of course, I didn't realize you were with Quelf. Yes, back in the day,
yes.
Which is fabulous. And I've always admired the Connecticut Women's Legal and Education Fund, and the work that they did to promote all the issues that women struggle with every day, and even to this day, and even more so in some ways.
Yeah, and I was luckily there when we led passage of the paid family medical leave program here in our state, which is really transformational for people, and really set Connecticut on a path where we are leaders in the country still, and having a program that just truly recognizes that people shouldn't have to lose their job, lose their income while they're caring for themselves, a loved one, or a child. And it's really been transformational for so many families. And I think it really, kind of sets the path forward for us in the state in making sure that we're, creating policies that really support families.
It does support families, but it also supports the state.
It does. It does. And our economy for
Yes.
everyone to stay engaged, employed, and productive.
Yeah, but the other thing is, because it's paid family medical leave, a lot of times the worker is able to, now the worker pays into a very tiny bit into the fund, but they're able to, if their family member has an illness or injury, they're able to help out instead of having the family member spend down and go on Medicaid. And when we first did that, I did some research in New York, and I found that when New York first put that into effect, they saved $90 million a year in Medicaid payments. So I thought, wow, this is a really fabulous program. Not only does it give parents a chance to be with the baby when the baby's born and they have that time, but it also saves the state money when someone in the family has a need, and you always want to help. You don't want to be stuck, oh, I got to go to work. You want to be able to be there when it's necessary for a family member. So this is something that has really been a fabulous program, and it's something that we need to keep talking about, because it's one of the things, you got to celebrate the victories and the glory of the things that are happening that help the people. And this is one thing that I had to be pretty much on our side of the aisle that made it happen.
Yeah, and like you said, now everyone's benefiting, and I think again, it's shocking to me. I have to admit that we are still one of the only industrialized countries in the world, right, that doesn't have paid family medical leave as a national program. But remains that I'm super proud that Connecticut made this happen, and that we're seeing the benefits.
Absolutely thrilled about that program, and I share your joy. So moving along about some of the other things that we have here now, some things that we've been able to do with going back to higher education, is the free community college.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about that program and where we are with it this year, and where we came from a little bit first, I guess, and where we are now.
Well, I think at the heart of it, right, it's trying to reduce those costs for access, because access and opportunity to education, I think, is at the heart of what we want to do in our communities and in our state. And the establishment of the PACT program to make sure that folks who are accessing community college here in our state could get those kind of last dollars covered after their financial aid was secured, really makes a difference for people, again, so they're not carrying such significant loans.
Yes.
And one of the things we looked at in the higher ed committee this year was we put a bill out of the committee that for those folks that are in community college and then transfer to one of our 4-year in-state institutions, that they could continue the use of that kind of free PACT program. And we think that that's a way, again, of further supporting, these students to continue their education beyond those 2-year institutions. But, everything we know, again, about, folks pursuing, be it community college or higher education here in the state of Connecticut, means that, we're securing our workforce of the future.
Absolutely. And one of the other things that I find, and I've been a big proponent of, is having educational opportunity in the high schools, so that the students can have, and we have here at Wyndham High, a wonderful program that works with the community college, Eastern and Yukon. So just depending on what the student is doing, they can get credits that are completely free and carry them on to the university. I've had students come to me and say, oh, I got an associate's degree while I was getting my high school education. And that is just wonderful. Imagine how busy that student was.
I wish we had that sort of opportunity back in the day. But yes, we also passed a bill out of higher education this year to establish more of a structure for more high schools to establish those what are called dual credit opportunities, and we just want to make sure that those dual credit opportunities are available to more high school students.
And that's such a great thing, because I've talked to university people about that, because I have plenty of opportunity to do that here, because Eastern's right here, and they are very pleased with that. They say, well, that means that we're going to get more people finishing their bachelor's degrees, because they have that chance to do that as they go in, instead of before we didn't have quite the good system, where maybe sometimes students would come in and have to take a loan, take non-credit courses to catch up with where they were, and then they couldn't finish the associate's degree. So now I think we've come full circle on that, and it's much better for our students and what they have. So it's really something that I'm really quite pleased about how we're moving forward in that. And I think it's going to be something, there's a lot of talk about, student loans and that sort of thing. But when we take a look at, we have a tech school here in Wyndham as well.
Yes.
And
you're surrounded. You can't go very far here without stepping over a school, can you?
And you know what? I love that.
Exactly.
I love that because I say that, Wyndham is an educational community. It's an educational center. And I think that's the message we have to make the people here, grab onto, because it really is. It's a lot of other things too, but being an educational center, we have the tech school and we have Arts Magnet School. We have the Barrows Academy that does all technical science in grades 1 through kindergarten through grade 8. And we have a dual language school. So we have students here who spend now all the way to grade 8. They can go and do dual language and that's the highest level of being
amazing.
able to take care of both languages. So it is amazing, and it's been here now for more than 30 years. So it's quite very, very proud of our educational spots here. But we got to really get out there, and like I say, if we don't promote these ideas and these victories that we have, then people say, they just take it as for granted. And, so we really have to do that on all levels of government and show what's successful and what's working. And these are fabulously successful programs. And I have some other ideas for more programs. So
I have no doubt. That's why you don't give up. That's why you don't give up as a legislator.
Thank you so much, and neither do you. So you're amazing what you're doing. And so this is Susan Johnson. I'm here with Representative Farrar from representing the 20th House District, which includes West Hartford and Newington. And we will be right back after these messages. Welcome back, everyone. This is Susan Johnson. I'm here with our very special guest this evening, Representative Farrar from West Hartford and Newington, the 20th House District. And she has done so many great things at the Capitol, and it's great to have her here because she and I serve as Deputy Majority Leaders, and we read every bill. Right, Kate?
We do, believe it or not. We're such nerds. Thankfully, it's part of our job as Deputy Majority Leaders.
Yes, it is. And I thought, wow, this is great. I get to screen everything that gets voted out of committee. And it really does, make a difference. So I'm very happy to be doing that. And I know that my colleague here is very happy as well. And but that's part of what we do at the Capitol. And boy, we got to get ready every Monday morning.
It is. A lot of behind the scenes work that goes into being a legislator.
Absolutely. I don't think a lot of people realize that. But one of the great things that you've been working on is something that we've been hearing about for some time, and that's the Connecticut Child Tax Credit. And that's something that probably has something to do with your work on the Finance Committee. You're on Finance, Revenue, and Bonding.
I am. Yeah, I have to say, when I was elected in 2020 and then became a part of the Finance Committee, this was really one of the first things that I looked closely at in really trying to figure out how we could establish a permanent child tax credit here in Connecticut. Because one of the things that I was really struck by once I got my legs under me as a new legislator was really getting an understanding of how upside down our tax code is in our state of Connecticut. All of the research on our tax code really points to that our working families, our middle class families in the state pay 4 to 5 times the effective tax rate of the wealthiest in our state. And when you hear something like that, you just think, well, that's just simply not right. And, a part of this is how can we, make sure that we're fixing that upside down tax code and really making sure that our tax code acknowledges the high costs of raising a family here in our state of Connecticut. We actually, do have one of the highest costs in the country to raise children. We actually have, the 5th highest cost of childcare, in the country here in the state of Connecticut. And we're actually the only high cost state that does not have a deduction or a credit for children in our tax code. And I think all of those things are why our families are struggling. We know from the United Way of Connecticut ALICE report that nearly 40% of families in Connecticut cannot make ends meet.
Tell us, Alice. What it
Yeah,
stands for.
Alice is a asset limited, income constrained, employed. And what that means is that these are families that are working in our communities, and yet, to pay all of those daily costs of housing, childcare, transportation, food, it's upwards of $125,000, for a family of four just to make ends meet in our state. And that's why, folks just, can't pay their bills, right? And they're really relying on us to, make a dent in how they can get relief. And that's why the child tax credit is a proven way to do that. Folks might be familiar with the term child tax credit because during the pandemic, we had a federal child tax credit, right?
Yep.
That made a substantial difference in families being able to make it through the pandemic. And the research on the federal child tax credit tells us that folks were using it to pay some of those basic needs costs. And at the same time, it cut child poverty in half in our country.
That was
for
phenomenal.
the few years we had it.
That was phenomenal. When
Yeah.
you learned that the tax credit and the federal level cut the child poverty in half, that is one of the things I think that people really missed. And now it's gone because the pandemic has been deemed not to be here anymore. And so that federal tax credit now is gone for the parents in those moderate or low to moderate income families.
Exactly. And we did have a child tax rebate for 1 year in the state of Connecticut in 2022. And that, offering near, over 80% of the families that were eligible for that did apply for that rebate, but it was a one-time offer that we had as a state. And that's why I've been so proud to be leading this effort to get a permanent child tax credit here in the state of Connecticut. And the current House bill, and thank you, Susan, for being one of our co-sponsors.
Oh, you're
we
welcome.
have really over 70 co-sponsors on this House bill this year. And this bill would provide $600 per child for up to 3 children in a family. And you'd be eligible if you're a single filer household that makes $100,000 or less, or a joint filer household that makes $200,000 or less. And we know, again, this would be a meaningful difference for so many of our families.
And how did you come at those figures?
In regards to the $600 and that amount, well, we know in looking at how we structured the rebate, the one-time rebate that we had, that number one, those income levels, are, kind of in line with where we know families are struggling. Because again, based on the United Way data, we know that, it takes, as I shared earlier, nearly $125,000 just to make ends meet. So we know that folks who are struggling are middle class. We know folks that are working, are struggling. And so that's why that $100,000 for the single filer and the $200,000 for the joint filer, recognizes that families in those income ranges really are struggling. And the $600 per child, really recognizes that could be a meaningful difference, while at the same time being something that as a state we can afford.
Yes, and thinking about that, now as you know, I'm sure from all the discussion that we've had, especially with the Birth to 3 caucus, the early childhood caucus, that when you look out here in Eastern Connecticut, we're actually a child care opportunity for child care access, a desert here. We don't have the kinds of access to, daycare for the children, or early childhood education, I should say, for the children. And this creates a real problem. Part of it has to do with the fact that it's hard to pay care providers enough.
It's true. It's true. This is why, as when we were just talking earlier, the high costs that families are facing for childcare, a lot of it is because there's just not enough access, right? There's not enough providers. And as you noted, the reason there aren't enough providers is that, they can't make a living by providing this care. And, I often, have to go back to think about the investment we've made in our state, in our country, in kindergarten through 12th grade. That's a big investment that we've made year after year. And yet, when you look at our early childhood years, the years of birth to 5, we've really only made an investment of dollars about 1/20th of the amount of investment that we've made in K to 12. And I think that puts in perspective how underfunded these years of birth to 5 really have been in our communities. And yet, at the same time, we know that from scientists, you speaking to being someone who cares a lot about scientists are so clear that the birth to 5 years are when the most brain development happens.
How many times have I had to say that at the Capitol? That's why we have this Select Committee on Special Education.
Yes.
So many of us realize that, including you. And, and it's also just stunning to me that that's not the socialization of the little ones 1 to 3, and then preschool and all of that. I mean, it's just such great, and the little ones want to be around other little ones. Put 2 babies together, and they're just like so happy to see each other because they recognize that they're, hey, here's another baby like me. It's just an amazing thing to be able to have that happen for the little ones. And
that's why high quality care matters so much, and why I would say, not only do we want to make sure that there is high quality care that parents can access, but we do want to make sure it's affordable. And that's why last year and this year, I have been proud to lead our House priority bills on childcare. And this year's bill, which is House Bill 5003, it tries to focus on this crisis for families in a few ways. One is that it's about providing some faster funding to families that need support for childcare. Number 2, it's about how we attract and retain childcare educators, because again, they need more pay, they need benefits to make sure that they can stay in these important jobs. And thirdly, the bill addresses the need to update our childcare facilities and create new childcare facilities. And I think that really speaks to your point about living in a childcare desert.
And we have some facilities that are in serious need of upgrading. And I hear from parents all the time that we're in need of making sure what we do have here we maintain. And that is very, very important. It's good to have that whole trajectory from birth all the way to first grade, taken care of. And I have to say one proud thing about Wyndham, because what we did is we did a high school renovation, and part of the high school renovation included birth all the way to preschool and kindergarten in one area of the high school.
Oh, amazing.
It's gorgeous.
And how has that worked out?
Oh, it's just started, and it's beautiful, and it's wonderful, and it gives us that whole thing about students with developmental needs, and what they're able to do in one place is they can have stability in how they're treated, the type of educational opportunities they have all the way to first grade, which really helps them be in a situation that they don't have to change from place to place to place. That stability and opportunity is really very important for the little ones. So I'm very thrilled that we did that, and it's a beautiful school now. It hadn't been touched for 50 years, and it was renovated as new, and we now have this all the way to first grade right there in the high school. Now my next hope is to do early childhood educational opportunity through that program, and I hope that we can get the schools, the UConn and Eastern and the community college, to help the students get certification to provide early childhood educational opportunities so that they can get that education for very little cost or no cost at all if they zoom through through their high school programs.
Yeah, I know for myself in West Hartford, in the local high school in my district, they have that early childhood program right in the high school, and it's made such a difference
Mm-hmm.
for students getting to have that experience at an early age of taking care of little ones, and also just seeing what a career can look like in the field. But that's why a part of our bill, and I know a lot of the conversations, is making sure that educators are truly paid what they're worth, because our public school educators are paid substantially more right now than our early childhood care educators. And as we just said, those earliest years are just as important, and we want to make sure that those educators are just as valued.
Yes, brain development is crucial, and the more the little ones have access to information and interaction and how to behave, the better off everybody in society will be as they move through the school system. So it's a very, very big, important thing. So tell us a little bit about how you think this will be administered, the child tax credit.
Well, going back to the child tax credit, that would be a part of everyone's kind of annual tax return process.
Mm-hmm.
So again, very similar to how the federal tax credit worked, that folks who were submitting their taxes on an annual basis would be able to get that refund right a part of the process. And that's what we want to make happen for ease of all of our tax filers. And again, our goal is to establish this in this legislative session, so it could go to work in the coming tax year, and again, really make a difference for families as they're trying to pay those bills. And often, as I said, it goes towards so many of those basic needs, but often, when you get that refund, you might use it to pay down a credit card bill, or you might use it to pay for that summer camp for your kid, or you might pay it to make those car repairs. But all that money goes right back often into the local economy, and that's why all the research on the child tax credit really shows that every dollar in a child tax credit puts $1.38 right back into the local economy, and that's why it really has that multiplier effect.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I think that we've seen with respect to these issues is the Connecticut Business and Industry Association and a lot of the chambers really want to make sure that more child care opportunities are available. Tell us a little bit about some of their interaction with you and the committees on these issues.
Yeah, great point. I know from connecting with our Connecticut Business Industry Association and businesses in my own district. First off, they really need to fill their jobs, right, and their job openings. And they know that folks having access to childcare and affordable childcare is what makes people available to show up and be their best selves and do their jobs well. And that's why childcare is such an essential need. But it's also why, that we've seen, the CBIA be supportive of pursuing tax policy like the child tax credit, because they know that families are struggling, and they know that the more that families have support, they're more likely to stay in Connecticut, they're more likely to fill these jobs. And that's what businesses really need. They need a highly trained workforce, and they need a strong workforce that's willing to fill these jobs that they have available. And so it's been great to partner with industry. And I would just say one of the other things that is getting piloted this year that we worked on last year in our child care priority bill is a program called TriShare. This is a program that has been working in Michigan and also North Carolina, where a particular company will work with the state. In this case, in this pilot program, it's Electric Boat. So Electric Boat is working with the state to set up a program in which the child care costs for their employees will be paid 1/3 by the parent, 1/3 by the state, and 1/3 by the employer. And we're trying this out to see how this works in Eastern Connecticut, again, given the needs that Electric Boat has had to fill many positions. And we're hopeful that it will go well enough that with some other employers in the state, this could be a good partnership.
Absolutely. That's a great, I love that idea of having the state and the family and the business help out. And I think that's a great way. It's direct too. It's one of those things where you can see what you're paying for and get the results. And I think that's one of the things in terms of how we operate, whether it's locally or statewide or at the federal level. Transparency about where your money goes and how it's working is such an important aspect of our jobs and making sure people understand how everything works. And it's always been one of my objectives to make sure we understand what we're doing and convey that, and then people know how it works and why you're paying this for that. And I love that idea. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. When we think about the different types of child care access, we have a number of different opportunities all throughout the state. We have daycare facilities, we have group homes, we have family daycare homes, we have all those different types of things. Are we going to be able to utilize the child tax credit to pay for those types of child care opportunities?
Well, the beauty of the child tax credit for families is that, you get to decide as a family, right, what those needs are. So we do know that families, when they've received a tax credit, often use it to pay towards child care. And one of the things, as you said, about the diverse options of childcare is one of the reasons that's important about having options around, childcare in homes or childcare in centers or pre-K in our public schools, is that, dependent on the family and also their needs or their employment responsibilities, you need these variety of options. Because for some families, they might be working a third shift and they need to find access to care. And often that might be in a childcare that's hosted in their neighborhood by a homeowner. And we need to make sure that families can access, all these different types of care. And that's why in our House Priority Bill 5003, we're focused on supporting the system so that, if you're a child care provider who's offering child care in your home, or if you have a center, or if you're offering pre-K in the schools, we want to support all of it because families really want that choice. And with all of those options to seek out child care, folks certainly would be able to use, the child tax credit to pay for any of those options for child care.
Excellent. I just want to make sure we're clear that no matter what type of child care you get, that is going to be something that you're going to be able to apply for the child care tax credit when you do your income taxes with the state of Connecticut.
Absolutely.
And that's a wonderful thing. And so we're getting close to the last minute. And why don't you say a few words just to summarize a few things of what your ideas are. And I want to just thank you so much for being here as well.
Oh, Susan, thank you. I know we could keep talking for hours. That's what we do at work all the time.
Yes, indeed.
I think for me and being here, and thank you for the opportunity to come over and talk about these important issues. I think to me at the heart of it is that, I view it as it's really our role to really make a difference for so many of our families that are struggling. And, families, they cannot make ends meet according to the status quo. And it's our job to really make those policy decisions that can make a difference for so many of our families. And, those are proven with what we could do with the child tax credit. And it's also proven if we make this investment in early childhood education, it will pay off, not just for the families, but for our economic future. And I'm just hopeful, as you said, that we can work together to make some very important changes this session for our budget. And no matter what comes at us and the chaos in Washington, these are things we can do right here in Connecticut that will make a difference for families.
Absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much, Representative Farrar, for being here, representing the 20th House District, and as a Deputy Majority Leader. Thank you for all your work and leading the charge here for the Connecticut Child Tax Credit. This is a great work. Thank you so much for being
Thank you.
Let's talk about it.